Next up, we have ensuring stability that scales, collateral design approaches and challenges. And on this panel, we have Walter from Gauntlet, Sam from Liquidity, Seraphim from Athena, Tao from Aladdin DAO, and Monet Supply from Block Analytica, with the panel moderated by Matt from Redstone. Let's give him a round of applause.
All right. Hello, everyone. So my name is Matt. I lead BD for Redstone, which is an Oracle provider. Happy to have you here. I think what we are going to discuss here is going to be super important over the next couple of months as we see some of the newcomers on the stablecoin / synthetic dollar market sort of grow rapidly. So definitely, this is a narrative that we are seeing right now over at crypto Twitter, but not only. I think it's a general theme of seeing the real product market fit of stablecoins that we've seen for the past couple of months, and I think it's going to continue. So having those kinds of discussions about the design, about the design of those stablecoins is super important. And with that, I would like everybody here to introduce themselves, maybe starting with Seraphim. If you could just give us a 1-minute intro into what you do, what you focus on in your protocol, and what your protocol is in general.
Hey, I'm head of growth at Athena. We are not a stablecoin. I have no idea what I'm doing here anyway. It's a synthetic dollar, okay? And we create, in a way, a tokenized basis trade where we take OSTs, we use it as collateral to short ETH perps, and you get like this pretty cool stablecoin called USDE, and it has some ridiculous yield. That's why people have been talking about it a lot. You know?
Hey, I'm Monet Supply. I'm a risk analyst at Block Analytica, and we work with MakerDAO and the DAI stablecoin, but also some other mainly lending protocols, but other smaller stablecoins to help them manage their risk and kind of align their strategy with the best risk return that they can.
I'm Sam. I'm the BD and comms guy at Liquidity. Liquidity is a borrowing protocol where you can borrow against your ETH, and you get a stablecoin called LUSD, the most decentralized one out there. I'm here because we're coming out with a V2 in the coming months, which we feel will be a new primitive within the CDP space, in that it will pioneer something called user-set interest rates. And yeah, just want to talk about it and see the different approaches that we're taking with stablecoins.
Hi everyone, this is Tao. So I'm the intern for the FX protocol, so no one can blame on me, right? So the whole team is very busy on the FX USD launch. It was yesterday and the 3 million so far, so it's doing very well. So here I just trying to present for the FX USD and the FX protocol, then I can get my return offer. That's it.
Hey guys, I'm Walter. I'm a data scientist at Gauntlet. Gauntlet is a crypto economic research firm where we specialize in quantitative optimization at the forefront of DeFi. So some of the problems that we look to solve are like risk management type of problems, incentive optimization type of problems. The spectrum is pretty broad. Yeah, excited to be here.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everybody. First topic, yield. Let's start with that. So in the bear market, the 5 or 6% yield that we had, thanks to RWAs like T-bills, has proven to be a very attractive value prop in attracting liquidity to stablecoins and attracting retail users in general. Now, how do you see that dynamics playing out, especially when the numbers go up, when we have a bull market probably coming, already happening, and everybody wants to have, I guess, direct exposure to those prices. So do you think that the yield we can get on stables is still an attractive VP value prop for retail, or would you say that this is now sort of a different category of users that we are trying to attract? Maybe some bigger institutions, maybe somebody that's less, that's, I'd say, more risk averse, somebody that just wants to have something that's stable with stable yield. So maybe I'll start with Seraphim. What do you think about this?
Yeah, it's not attractive. It's not attractive, 5%, I think. at some point during the end of last year, people just went crazy and just decided that 5% is not enough because Ethereum started pumping, Bitcoin started pumping. I don't want to sound like I told you so, but I told you so because like in October, it was the top of the interest rates. I think 10-year was about 5% and then started going down to 4%. And if you're betting on the bull market, you're kind of betting on treasury yields going down in the end of the day, probably to 2% or 0. So now you have to look at alternatives. If you have a stablecoin or something resembling a stablecoin, how do you provide yield on top of treasuries? And I think funding rate's the only scalable thing that we came up with, which is why we've seen like $500 million in 2 weeks, pretty much. So yeah, I think 5% is just not enough. I think it's going to come back in the bear cycle, but during this bull market, it's just not enough now.
Monet?
I think it's an interesting conundrum because, in a sense, I agree 5% isn't really enough to get anyone excited anymore when Bitcoin goes up 20% in a week. But then the flip side is 0% seems to be enough for a lot of people. We see that USDC has finally kind of bottomed out on their circulating supply, and now it's coming back up. Tether has been up only for a while as the conditions got more bullish. So as the bull market progresses, there is some correlation with prices going up and circulating supply of these stablecoins going up. So I think if we can figure out how to displace some of these zero yielding stablecoins with ones that do share some of their revenue with consumers, that's strictly sort of a benefit for consumers. Even if they're not excited about it, they'd still pick the one that gives them yield versus the one that doesn't, all else equal, if we get decent liquidity on these options and such. So yeah, I think that there's still a place for the boring 5% yield, even if it's not getting anyone excited.
I think, yeah, what you said makes a lot of sense from the perspective of USDT and USDC, but I think the reason that that's working out is because they have different PMF from what most of the people in DeFi do. We mostly create, at the moment in DeFi, yield products only. People only care about the yield. And yes, USDC and USDT is growing in terms of TVL or market cap, but I think that's because their PMF is slightly different. Like, for example, Tether is used expansively a lot as a settlement currency for perps. As bull market rages on, people want to trade these things more, they settle more. So it's just a function of activity in the crypto market. Well, in DeFi, we come up with yield products, so probably that's why, but I might be wrong, I don't know. I hope eventually we transcend the yield game into something more tangible, like Tether and Circle did, though, as DeFi,
Sam?
Yeah, coming from a very decentralized protocol, I think there's just a crew or a niche within the space who just prefer having an asset that's just backed by Ether, which gives them 5-6%. You can see that with how LUSD has kind of been operating for the last 3 years or so now. 50% of our circulating supply, give or take, has been sitting in the stability pool, which is yielding them 5-6% throughout the 3 years that we've been there. And it's not really deviated from that much. So I think there's still always a section of people who will just like getting safe yield. But what's interesting is I think in the coming years and months, we'll see more and more protocols come with, I guess, strategic ways in which you can have stablecoin supply and also borrowing demand, and also different unique propositions like what you guys are building at Athena, where you can kind of have an equilibrium between different parties, right? And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how, I think in the bull market, maybe 5-6% is not enough, but in the bear it might be. So will be interesting to see how the equilibrium kind of settles at down the line.
Tao?
Yeah, so as a DeFi user, I think it depending what kind of risk you're taking. If you take high risk, you want more reward. If you take low risk, 5% is okay. So it's basically, I want to understand what's this yield coming from, and is that lasting? If it's lasting, then what if that yield token will be getting more, then I'm satisfied. So just the number doesn't make sense to me. So I want to understand the first principle behind that. What's this yield coming from? That's the most important things I care about. Yeah.
Walter?
Yeah, I think that stablecoins with a huge variety of yield, like there's going to be a use case for all of them in the end. Consider the huge inflow of funds from TradFi into DeFi. Like these users are pretty new to crypto. They're pretty used to the 5% that exists in TradFi. So there's a pretty big money making opportunity for a lot of protocols. Like if you just offer like an improvement on that 5%, like a small improvement, you're definitely going to have some users, pretty sticky users that are not so crypto native in general. Of course, at the same time, with the bull market, there are so many new paradigms evolving, so many second-order interactions between protocols. You can definitely spin up some new stablecoin yield-generating opportunities between these protocols. And of course, like depending on the particular user's risk profile, their penchant for doing degenerate activities on-chain, there's many different things that can pop up, many different opportunities to explore. And of course, even with a lot of these degenerate users, you can still like have stablecoins that don't yield as much appeal to them as well. There are a lot of trade-offs here as well. For instance, like supposing you have a stablecoin that doesn't generate as yield, it might be attractive in a different form of sense, right? It can be perhaps more flexible across DeFi. It has greater use cases as collateral, for instance. So there are many different things that we can explore here, not just the yield that can make stablecoins pretty attractive as well.
So I think the consensus is that there's going to be different products for different people, different types of users. And I think we can count on the new inflow of users, both institutional and retail. So the pie is just going to be bigger. It's just going to make more sense to create different types of stables and or crypto dollars in general for different types of those user brackets, if you will. Now, diving deeper into the source of that yield, because as we will probably see the crypto native yields go up, there is probably also going to be a lot more products or stablecoins built on top of those crypto native yields. So maybe just to get a bit of a mental model first, and I'd like to start with Molnet here. What would be the best sources of crypto native yield that you see popping up or already existing? And on the flip side, what do you think people will be using that maybe should not be used as sort of a collateral for a stablecoin or a source of yield?
Yeah, I think I'll start with, an easy example of something not to use, which is kind of just like the Terra Anchor model, where they back their stablecoin with their own volatile token, and then they just kind of like print new stablecoins to incentivize users to hold it. It seems pretty clear that no matter how you tweak that general model, it's not going to be stable or reliable in the long run. But I think my overall mental model of like where the yield comes from in crypto native stablecoins is basically someone borrowing your stables from you in order to lever up one way or another. So for Maker, people are just directly borrowing DAI because they want to have 2x exposure to ETH or wrap Bitcoin or something like that. For something like a sort of perp basis trade, when people go long on the perp, if you're doing a delta neutral position, you're counterbalancing their exposure by shorting it. So in like a roundabout way, you're lending them money to go long. So I think it's, that's kind of the source of all of the crypto native yield is people want more exposure to crypto upside and they're willing to pay for it. And it's, fundamentally, if you have sound collateral, it's a totally reliable and safe way to generate a yield.
Walter, would you like to add something here or disagree somewhere?
No, I think what Monet said makes a lot of sense, right? Like, we could probably generalize it even more by saying that instead of levering up, it's more like I have a vision, I have a dream, I have a trade that I want to put on, and I'm looking for a cheaper way to help me execute that trade. This can be liquidity providing, this can be leveraging up for perps, a lot of use cases out there. But yeah, I definitely echo the statement on the Terra Luna stuff. The key here is like, when you build a mechanism where you print stablecoins, or you mint stablecoins based on some reflexive debt spiral type of mechanism where it's pretty easy for the stablecoin to go to zero. If your collateral is continuously getting printed, then that's obviously not something good, and that's definitely a lesson that we all learned very strongly from 2 years ago.
So tapping into that and maybe starting with Tao, how would you say FXUSD is prepared for that? I mean, prepared for high crypto native yields. How do you guys use that, and how do you plan on growing in that sort of market conditions?
Sure. Yeah, I think FXUSD is still very new. So at a high level, we are splitting the LSD, the ETH, into the stablecoin FXUSD, and another one is the long leverage token. So you can think about the long leverage token will absorb all the volatility for the FXUSD. So then FXUSD holder and the X token holder is hedging against each other. So we have a rebalance pool, so FXUSD holder can stake to the rebalance pool, so to get the native LSD yield and the FX emission. So you can use in a stable coin to get the very solid staking LSD reward. Then for the leverage token, the X token, you can get the free leverage, which don't have the liquidation risk and also no funding cost. So kind of like we split the ETH based on the volatility and create two products for the two different type of investor. One want to do the leverage, another one just want the minting the stable yield with the stable coin.
Sam, how would you say liquidity is prepared for the bull market in that sense, both if it comes to V1 and what you guys are working on if it comes to V2 as well?
Yeah, so I think with V1, it's always going to have a place to stay, and you can see with the way we've done for the last 3-4 years, it's always been stable, and the TVL speaks for itself. But what we've realized is that with rising interest rates, maybe having a fixed one-time borrow fee model maybe is not the best way to go if in different market environments, right? So with Liquidity V2, what we want to change is with this new advent of user-set interest rates, we will essentially have a way in which there's an equilibrium between supply and demand of borrowing and the stablecoin. And this should also in turn mean that the people who hold the stablecoin and stake that stablecoin within the stability pool actually get revenue in the form of the borrow fees that are occurring as well. Kind of different from Liquidity V1, where you would essentially get liquidation gains and just LQTY emissions. So what this means is that Liquidity V2 will probably be a little bit more sustainable in the way that the stablecoin works. And on top of that, we also have seen like the market demands LSTs and now even maybe LRTs and a way to borrow against those type of assets. And with Liquidity V2, we'll be definitely supporting LSTs. With LRTs, we're still a few things we need to figure out. But by being able to give the borrower the yield that they keep from borrowing against these LSTs, and also being able to have a stable coin that is pretty decentralized with no real world backing it, in the sense that there's not going to be any real world assets, it's just crypto native. We think that we'll be like a home of Ether, so to speak, for both naked ETH holders and also LST holders.
Seraphim, you kind of explained that a bit, but if you could just expand a bit on the funding rates, that's one, and like how Ethena plans to capitalize on those market conditions as well.
Yeah, the bull market is not a problem for Ethena. On the contrary, we're probably the only kind of yield-bearing asset that kind of has higher interest rates when the bull market is raging on, which is why it's like 25%, which is completely ridiculous. And most of that comes from the funding rate on the perp side. And during bull markets, what people want to do, they want to be levered long. So by shorting, which is what we're doing, we're basically earning that funding rate, which is on some markets even 40%. So we're basically subsidizing leverage in some sort of a way. And actually most source of yield in DeFi at the moment is pretty much leverage of some sort, one way or another. Ours is pretty clearly leverage based. Options would be an interesting one I haven't seen yet. Restaking, I think, is a different one. It does seem to underwrite something more than just a desire to be long the price, which is quite interesting, I think. We are looking at LRTs as well in some way. It's just that what we do, we take collateral like LSTs and ETH on centralized exchanges to short perps, where 95% of all the volume is. Until centralized exchanges allow LRTs as collateral there, we can't really use it. But once they do, and from the conversations I'm having, it seems like it's not so far away, like a year away maybe, you could actually maybe use Puffer Finance or ETHify on BitGet, for example, to start with, and short perps there. So what was the question again? I don't know. That was it?
Capitalizing on the bull market.
Yeah, we're going to do that. It's going to work out. So.
Perfect. So actually, this segues nicely into my next point that I'd like to stop at for a bit, which is LRTs, and starting with Walter as well, giving the work that you've already done on that topic. What was kind of interesting to me is definitely the scale of the demand for LRTs as well. So right now, from an Oracle perspective, because we provide price feeds for these assets, almost everybody wants to have them as collateral, to the point of also Aave, I think yesterday, launching the second stage of the proposal to onboard ETHify's ETH as well, which just shows the scale of the demand that we see right now in the market for that. So would you say, from your perspective, that LRTs are mature and or liquid enough to be used as collateral, perhaps for stablecoins, or like in general on the lending side of things on the DeFi market?
Yeah, that's a great question. For sure, right? LRTs are the hot topic in DeFi these days. EigenLayer is the hottest protocol in the market right now. That being said, like obviously a lot of the functionality on EigenLayer is not live yet. So when all those functionalities are enabled, like the payment systems, the slashing systems, when those are all enabled, and when LRTs, figure out how like they will actually absorb that yield, how they will not return them, but like how they will give it to its users, how they will give it to its operators, and the LRTs become a very different asset. At the current point in time, LRTs are more like a basket of LSTs, so naturally they possess like a fairly similar risk profile to LSTs. The primary thing on top, of course, is the point system with EigenLayer. Naturally, there's the issue of like, not the issue, but like the aspect of the external liquidity as well. It's something that we've all been exploring. Naturally, like this is something that will continue to evolve over time, especially with stuff on Pendo, with stuff on Balancer. So yeah, it definitely remains to be seen what it's going to be like down the road.
Well, Nate, from your perspective, would you say that this is, you've got the same views as Walter, would you say that this is, there's some caveats to it? Well, Nate, yeah.
Yeah, I think right now it's kind of just like a pool one. So other than liquidity risk and technical risk of just like the restaking token contracts, it's not that different from just an LST. I think that it's a little bit challenging to introduce this to a lot of lending markets as they stand now, something like a Aave or a Spark, because most of these LRTs, or LSTs, they're used on those lending markets to borrow ETH and lever up and do the leveraged staking trade. And if you have an LRT that maybe is yielding 1 or 2% higher than a regular LST like staked ETH or something, their willingness to pay for borrowing ETH is going to be higher, potentially enough higher that it'll displace anyone using Rocket ETH or Lido staked ETH to do that trade, and you'll just end up with 100% of your ETH borrowing exposure against these kind of newer, less proven, less liquid restaking tokens. So I think it's a little bit challenging to onboard them to lending markets as they stand now, but yeah, in the medium or the long term, as they get more liquid, as they get more proven, there's going to be probably a lot more integrations in play.
So we got a bit of perspective from Seraphim here that for Ethena to use LRTs, they would have to be traded at Texas, basically. But when it comes to liquidity, for example, I know you guys are planning on potentially integrating some of these assets into V2. So what's the criteria here? What's the mind model behind which assets to choose, and what's the basis for that?
Yeah, I mean, we take security very seriously. So when we've been considering assets, we look at, okay, is that particular LRT or LST immutable? Does it have an admin key? How liquid is it? How decentralized is it? Is there what's the Oracle situation for that particular LRT or LST as well? So it's like a mix of 7-8 different things that we consider. With the LRTs, one of the worries, as I think Walter mentioned, is we just don't know the risks just yet because a lot of the stuff hasn't gone live yet. And for us with Liquidity V2, we want to make it as governance minimized as possible. That's one of the kind of core philosophies that we have. And when we take that into account, if we want a protocol to stand there for the next 10, 15 years, can we integrate some of these LRTs that already have these 7-8 criteria things knocked out of the park, right? So it's definitely something that we're spending some time thinking about. But yeah, as I mentioned, yeah, it's a mix of all these 7-8 different things.
Tal, from Aladdin's perspective, because you guys are also planning potentially on adding some more assets than you currently support, would you say that LRTs is something you guys are looking at as well, or would you like to stay within the LST basket for now?
Yes, so basically we are going to integrate with Ethena. Oh, no, Ether5.
Oh, I was like, what?
Sorry. Yeah, maybe, right?
Let's do it.
Yeah. Ether5, very quick. So, sorry, I just leaking out alpha, so. Whoops. So basically, we don't do, we take the security very carefully. So we do the separate, we do the isolation. So the currently FXUSD, we only do the STETH and the FAX ETH. Then we will do the separate one. So we just separate the volatility. So it will be a separate rebalance pool and a separate X token for the LRT. Yeah. Then if the market approve that, then enough liquidity, the risk have been reduced. Then through the government token, then we can move that LRT also part of the FXUSD. So it's possible, but not now yet.
Scalability. Probably the best way to start with this topic would be to get a bit of a mental model again for what it actually means. If I have a stablecoin protocol, what it means, what would I have to do to be able to serve 1 billion users of that protocol? So Monet, would you like to give us some of your thoughts on this? What pieces do I have to have in place in order for that asset to be able to scale to that level?
Yeah, I think the first thing is you need the sort of minting mechanism for your stablecoin to actually be able to create enough units of it to serve the needs of, millions or maybe even billions of users. And at least historically, we've seen that it's been really, really difficult to generate enough stablecoins from crypto-native sources. So stuff like Maker CDPs, for instance. Back in 2020, Maker had big challenges with actually getting enough CDP users to mint DAI to meet user demand for it. And that was kind of the impetus behind Maker onboarding USDC and then eventually sort of further integrating with off-chain assets. There's ways you can get around it though, or at least improve the trade-off space a little bit. I think Liquidity V1 is an example of that, where they pushed the limits of capital efficiency for minting stablecoins. But yeah, I think that's the first challenge, is thinking what what mechanism is going to allow me to create enough stable coins to actually meet sort of a global demand for money. And at least so far, I think it's not clear if you can do that with just crypto native collateral. You may need to at least partially meet that demand for money with off-chain assets that you're tokenizing.
Walter, would you like to add some pieces of infrastructure here, or any checks that you have to sort of get done before you can reach the scale of a billion users of your protocol?
Yeah, sure. A billion users is it's a very large number of users. Hopefully we all get to that point eventually, right? Within, hopefully this bull market, right? Like, it's pretty optimistic. But no, what Monet said, I definitely agree with a lot, right? You need a strong minting mechanism. When the stablecoin becomes more mature, as well as time goes on, you need a strong redemption mechanism as well. So yeah, what Maker did with DAI PSM was pretty strong in that regard. DAI had that strong organic demand vector, was consistently trading over, like slightly over $1, and then the PSM was implemented, which let it rebalance quite a bit in the end and let it achieve peg. But in the end, like, what really drives stablecoin adoption is how much it can be used in DeFi and how like flexible it can be in the end. For a stablecoin to have strong usage, it has to have organic demand vectors, and the challenge in the end is to find out how these demand vectors can work with one another. Like, what part of DeFi, like say like lending and perps, how can they interact with each other, and how can we create like stablecoins to find that like optimal fit? And once we find that optimal fit, we can drive adoption that way.
Sam, given your experience with V1, what would you say were the biggest constraints if it comes to scaling LUSD to large numbers of users, and how do you guys plan on combating these constraints in the V2 design?
Good question. One of the main constraints obviously was that it's immutable. So we made the protocol and that was it. Like, we had to deal with the parameters that we had set there. And one of the parameters there was, it was a fixed one-time interest rate, borrow fee, sorry, and you would have essentially LQTY emissions going into the stability pool, along with liquidation gains that people could get. The problem here is that there was no real lever to move people to move that LUSD outside of that stability pool. When LUSD was over or under $1, there was not really like a mechanic to change that. Now with Liquidity V2, since we're going to have something called user set interest rates, and a majority of these borrow fees that borrowers pay when they borrow goes towards holders of the stablecoin, what we'll see now is that when there's a lot of borrowing demand and the APRs are quite high, we expect that people will hold the stablecoin within the stability pool. But when they see that, let's say, interest rates are low and that direct revenue is not flowing towards the stability pool, and people, they want to go ape into Ethena or SDAI or whatever it is, you will see that there's going to be like a lever to move that stablecoin outside the stability pool to different places whenever it's over or under 1. So I think that's one key thing that we're going to have in Liquidity V2, that's this lever within the protocol with the user set interest rates that should make it, I would hope, a lot more scalable.
Tao, same question to you if it comes to FX USD. Just launched, so probably not much experience if it comes to hitting those limits. But what would you say the biggest constraints will be for FX USD if it comes to reaching like proper scale?
I think the challenge part for the FX protocol is increase both the stable pair and the leverage pair, like increase at the same time. Like, if one side increase too much, then the other side is kind of like a risk. So that's kind of challenge one. But we are launching our first one, the FETH, which is 10% volatility of Ethereum. We run that eight months, and we have like $30 million TVL. So we are kind of like a battle testing this concept. That's why we go to the FX USD. Yeah. Sorry.
Seraphim, there is a lot of discussions on Twitter about this. I feel like everybody, with my mom included, is talking about the Ethena's design and what it means for the future of stablecoins. So would you say that the exponential growth of the protocol is a risk factor as well, or a constraint in itself? Or if not, then what the constraints really are if it comes to scaling USDE to millions and millions of users? Is it OI? Is it some other liquidity-related metrics on the market?
Actually, before we get to that billion-dollar question thing, billion user thing, I think I had thoughts like, if you need 1 billion users, you need distribution partners that have 1 billion users. And so far in crypto, it seems like DeFi is like 30 dudes. But in CeFi, like Binance, if you sum up Binance, OKX, Bybit, Ledger, Tron, you might get to 200 million maybe. And that was our bet. We were going to trade in centralized exchanges where all these users are. We'll probably go to Tron, whatever they say about Justin Sun, because that's where the users are. So I think the direct way to do it is just tap into distribution partners that actually have these users in the first place. And scale on Athena, yeah. So basically, the fun on Twitter is basically we can't scale it too much because we're constrained by the open interest on Ethereum, which is, I think we already account for 6% of all the Ethereum perps at the moment. So let's say we get it to 20. Beyond that, the answer is Bitcoin. Because it's got 20 billion bucks in open interest. If we account for 10, 20% of that, it's pretty kosher. At 5 billion TVL, with the interest rates that we have, even at 10%, we are probably the best performing in terms of revenue company in the world. So I don't mind it. It's okay. We can stay at 5 bill. If we wanted to go beyond that, we'd say we have to change strategy probably a little bit, unless the open interest increases, which actually it does with bull markets. When there's a bull market, open interest tends to increase a lot. But if not, we can always go RWA, right? If there's a bear market or we want to really go to 100 billion bucks, hopefully we have that problem one day. We can go to RWA. But for now, I think by simply adding Bitcoin and taking Ethereum open interest at 30 billion bucks, if we account for 10% of that, that's okay. That's fine.
Stability. Starting with Walter on that topic. So probably a fairly similar question if it comes to what pieces of infrastructure you've got to have in place for your crypto dollar and or stablecoin to be stable, however you want to define stable.
Yeah, so I consider stability to be a sort of two-dimensional type of problem. On one axis, you have the time aspect of it, like stablecoins can depeg very suddenly, and they can go back very quickly, or it can be like a pretty long, drawn-out process. The other axis is obviously the magnitude part of it, like how much it can depeg. So yeah, I think when factoring in mechanism designs to like consider the stability aspect, you have to consider like these two components of it in the end. As for actual infrastructure, you need to make your mechanisms pretty robust. Like you need to have the correct safeguards in place to prevent sort of reflexive attacks or reflexive behaviors for your stablecoin as sort of like a defensive type of mechanism. Of course, you have to juxtapose that and you have to counterbalance that with like in a bull market, right? You need to make sure these mechanisms don't impede on the growth of your stablecoin. If they start impeding, then obviously like you're not going to be capturing that sort of money in, that extra funding, that extra revenue that your project could be generating.
Monet, given the history that Maker already has and the experience when it comes to keeping the peg of DAI and deploying all of the infrastructure that's needed for it, what would you say plays the biggest role currently if it comes to maintaining stability? And what would you say would be important for the future in terms of infrastructure for that?
Yeah, I look at stability kind of in two dimensions as well. There's like the liquidity aspect, which is whether somebody can get the price that they want for your stable coin at a moment's notice whenever they want it, whether they can sell it and get $1 back worth of value. And then there's solvency aspect, which is whether you actually have the asset backing to eventually bring it back up to the target price. And for Maker's case, the liquidity we handle with PSMs. We have alternative sort of dollar-denominated assets that we can exchange and kind of backstop that price for users. And then the solvency is the surplus buffer, so basically just extra capital that Maker retains on the balance sheet. Each of those factors do kind of create like a drag on Maker's financial performance and how much yield Maker is able to pay out to users. So like, USDC sitting in the PSM doesn't earn us anything. Funds that we're holding on the balance sheet in the surplus buffer, Maker holders would probably prefer that we're paying it out to them or doing buybacks. So in either case, it's a drag on financial performance, and I think the challenge is going to be, finding the right balance there to make sure that you're ensuring solvency, ensuring liquidity, but still actually, creating a attractive enough product for stablecoin users to want to use your product. They're getting paid enough for it, and then also for your governance token holders to be happy and basically tolerate your management.
Final question for whoever wants to jump in. Do you have any extraordinary or unique or out-of-the-box idea for a stablecoin or a crypto dollar, if you will, that has not been tried yet, that seems potentially interesting?
I did, but I shouldn't talk about it probably. It's going to get me in trouble.
I think we should run it back on like the degen box thing, but just levering up on Ethena USDE.
Oh, for me, I just promote my product, FXUSD. I want a full-time job, so.
Tao is definitely a shiller for his product right here. But like, that all makes sense, right? If I had a stablecoin idea, I'd be shilling it right here for sure as well. But no, I'm a DJ myself. I feel like personally, if I really want to play some games, I'd lever up on Athena as well.
All right, I think it's a nice place to wrap it up. So thank you, everybody, for participating in the discussion. And let's chat more about the stablecoin designs afterwards.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Matt.